What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Surfing the Stream, where every week we're on a quest to find out what is the greatest movie of all time. It is time to close out Captain America's trilogy with Captain America Civil War. I have been waiting to see this for a while now because Civil War is one of those movies that not only do I remember watching it for the first time in theaters, it is legitimately one of my favorite MCU movies, period. I will say this. Captain America's motivations in this particular film are understood better when watching his movies as a trilogy rather than every MCU movie back to back. Because I feel like I understand his character more so after watching the trilogy, whereas I was watching all those movies as they released, and then, you'd go back a few movies right before the new one releases. But I've never actually watched his trilogy back to back before. And I feel like I do understand his character a little bit better with the trilogy. But I think a lot of what this movie has to offer gets lost by not watching the 12 MCU films that came before it. Cap and Iron Man's feud started as early as the first Avengers movie, and with each entry, you can see the discourse just grow between them. You do miss out on that if you strictly just watch this Captain America trilogy. So personally, Captain America Civil War is best enjoyed if you go back and watch those previous 12 entries. But that's not necessarily the case. You don't have to go do that. It's just, it would be better for you. You would enjoy this movie more if you did that. Now that that's out of the way, it's time for me to mention why I really love this movie altogether. I have complained about the action in the previous two Captain America movies. I felt like the action was kind of hit and miss, and I particularly did not like it in The Winter Soldier. The action throughout Civil War is some of my favorite in the MCU. Cap's shield uses it to perfection in this movie. I made the complaint with The Winter Soldier. It gets very monotonous, the action does, in The Winter Soldier because he uses his shield so damn much. But in this particular movie, it's not used too much and it's not used too little. And he actually uses it more practically, I feel like, while in combat. The airport sequence, great blend of humor and action that makes it one of the highlights of not just this movie, but the MCU. Although if I do have one complaint here, okay, it is the fact that there are no real stakes involved with this huge fight. And I think that tends to be the thing that most fans kind of complain about this movie. And we'll get into the other big complaint here in just a minute. They're fighting and it looks cool. 100%, the fucking fight looks great. But there's no real anger. There's no real animosity between these heroes. They don't really hate each other. So the fact that you have this movie called Civil War, it's not really a Civil War. You could argue that they're just really just doing training exercises in this movie. That's the kind of stakes that we have in this airport sequence. Now, the opening sequence in Nigeria is a very underrated action sequence. It's not very often we get the Avengers doing like side missions as a team that doesn't involve the end of the world. So I really enjoyed those interactions between this portion of the Avengers, not the core group. Now, there are solid performances across the board. Robert Downey Jr., one of the standouts here. I think it's one of his better performances as Tony Stark. And then one character that I've never been a huge fan of up until the Russo brothers took over her character, that is Black Widow. Never been a huge fan of her before this particular movie. I actually enjoyed Black Widow's scenes, interactions with the other characters. Like, I still want to roll my eyes with some of Black Widow's humor throughout this movie, but it is better in this particular movie. I don't feel like they have ever really gotten Black Widow's character just correct up until now. And the introduction of Black Panther and Spider-Man into the MCU was just pitch perfect, absolutely fantastic. Black Panther even gets like a nice little character arc here that immediately makes him relatable. Spider-Man will always be my second favorite comic book character of all time, right behind Batman. And here, Tom Holland does not disappoint in his first appearance as Spider-Man. We finally get Spider-Man as a teenager, and again, pitch perfect. And while Daniel Bruhl does a fantastic job as Zemo in this movie, I feel like there definitely needed to be more of him. But again, Typical Marvel don't really give a shit about the villains. They only care about the heroes. And I'll make the claim again. The hero is only as good as his villain is. And I get the argument that they don't really need the villain in this movie. They just need him to kind of be the puppet master, pulling the strings in the background. I get it. This whole movie is about the Avengers fighting each other. But I think it could have been taken up to the next level if Zemo was just a tad bit better in this movie. But regardless, they did a decent enough job, a good job. They did a great job of giving him motivations for trying to tear the Avengers apart from the inside. I just wish he had a little bit more screen time with either Captain America or one of the other Avengers. He really only ever talks to the Winter Soldier and then Captain America at the very end. And then lastly, the overall story is fantastic. Could have been better for sure. And I understand people will have their issues with comparing it to the Civil War comics. But for what we got, I think they did a great job of adapting that comic. I think the heart of the story is definitely the divide between Tony and Cap, more so than any of the other characters. And you just kind of feel for these characters, more so Tony, as the story unfolds. And I will say this, and this kind of goes back to my original point that this movie is best served by watching the previous 12 movies. You get a little bit more of that. You get attached more to the character if you do it that way versus just watching these 3 movies. But I will say this, Team Iron Man all day. Iron Man had Winter Soldier and Captain America on the ropes. It took a little cheap shot from the Winter Soldier for Captain America to beat Iron Man. Bullshit move, whatever. So sadly, you do have to watch the 12 other movies to get the most out of this. But regardless, if you watch the previous 12 movies, if I watch just the other 2 movies in this trilogy, this is still one of my favorite comic book movies, period. Guys, let me know in the comments below if you agree with me. If you don't, what did you like with the Civil War comics that they didn't translate to the movie or vice versa? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, that would greatly benefit us and we would greatly appreciate it. But other than that, guys, I will catch y'all next time on another episode. Later.